We got commitments coming down the pipeline this week, and joining us to talk about that and some other recruiting nuggets, we got Parker Thune, OU insider from 247 Sports, on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation, and welcome to Locked On Sooners. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. They're the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. And joining me is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref. Josh, what's up, man?
What is going on? We do have, we think, good news on the horizon for Oklahoma, and that means we got to call in the expert. We got to welcome in Parker Thune to Locked On Sooners. Parker, what's up, man? How we doing?
Man, always a pleasure to jump on with you guys. As you mentioned, big week ahead for Oklahoma. I've said for a while, I believe they go at least 1 for 2 with the pair of players that are going to be committing on August 26th. The Sooners haven't taken a whole lot of L's, though, in these high-profile recruiting battles as of late. So Brent Venables and this staff, no doubt, going to attempt to pull off a sweep when we get announcements from Anthony Evans and Makari Vickers this Friday.
So where do you think they're leaning, and which one do you think is potentially the most likely? I know both of those guys have really been targeted by a lot of these high-level teams, these big-time programs. I mean, Anthony Evans' recruitment's just kind of been all over the place.
It has, John, and looking ahead to these two decisions, which should come down within hours of one another, I'm very confident that the Sooners end up landing Makari Vickers, and I've had a crystal ball prediction in to reflect that belief since early June. Really, whenever Keon Brown committed in the aftermath of the Champ U barbecue, especially as somebody that wasn't even on an official visit at that point, hadn't yet taken his official visit, and also comes from the same hometown as Makari Vickers. Those two are close. They've known each other for a while. It really solidified to me that Vickers was going to end up in Norman because things were already trending in that direction. It just seemed like Vickers needed somebody else to jump in the boat with him to increase that comfort factor, and who better to do it than the other stud from your hometown, Tallahassee, Florida, in the 3-star wide receiver, Keon Brown. So once the Sooners got that surprise commitment for Brown, it greatly increased my confidence that the Sooners were going to end up closing on Vickers as well. And I believe they're in position to do so heading into his announcement this Friday evening. Anthony Evans, as you mentioned right off the top, has had a very, very interesting recruitment, to say the very least. Was committed to Arkansas for quite a while, decommitted in the winter, actually in order to take a visit to Oklahoma. That was the reason why he decommitted from Arkansas, is because he wanted to visit Oklahoma. He picked up the OU offer. OU began to trend pretty nicely in that recruitment. But then you got Georgia creeping into the mix, Texas A&M emerged, as did Penn State. It really became about those 4 programs as spring gave way to summer. And then down the stretch here, it's really felt like a 2-team race between OU and Georgia. I'll say this. There is confidence in both camps right now, which you get a situation every now and again. A situation like this when you're covering recruiting day in and day out. There, you'll be a week from decision day, and you'll have 2 programs, if not more, that feel very, very good about where they stand with a particular player. And, you know, the old adage, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none, right, is always the analogy, or I guess it's the hallmark that people abide by when you're talking about a quarterback battle. When you're talking about a recruiting battle, when you got 2 programs confident, nobody should be confident. That's the reality of the situation. And so I am much less confident in Oklahoma's chances with Anthony Evans. And I think at this point, it's just about a 50-50 coin flip between the two. And I don't think it's over one way or another. I would hazard a guess that Anthony Evans still has plenty to think about as he creeps closer and closer to that commitment date. But across the recruiting industry, there's not even a consensus as to where Anthony Evans lands. You see expert predictions for Oklahoma, including my own. You see expert predictions for Georgia. So it's one of those situations where we may not know until he picks up the hat. Either way, you do have confidence coming out of the Oklahoma camp, and you do have confidence coming out of the Georgia camp. So again, everybody's confident, which means nobody should be confident heading into yet another August 26th decision for the 4-star wideout out of San Antonio.
So then on that subject, what gives you confidence, Parker, that Anthony Evans ultimately picks OU?
So I've felt for a while that Oklahoma is where Anthony Evans wants to be in his heart of hearts. And you don't have to look much further than the reason he decommitted from Arkansas in the first place, right? He decommitted from Arkansas because Oklahoma has started to express more interest. They wanted him to come take a visit so that they could offer him. But he had to decommit from Arkansas first. He did. He took the visit. He got the offer. And ever since then, it's really felt like Oklahoma hasn't led this thing by a drastic margin, but they've been comfortably in front. And Georgia has tightened things up. They've made this a race over the last couple of months. But man, I really do believe that with his relationship with LaDamian Washington in particular, this is a recruitment that LD Washington was very, very heavily involved with even before he took over as interim wide receivers coach in the aftermath of Cale Gundy's resignation. I don't want to say it's a slam dunk because I don't think it is, as I mentioned, but I think the relationship with LaDamian Washington and the relationship with Jackson Arnold as well can give Oklahoma some legitimate confidence heading into that Friday decision. And things may change over the next few days. Whenever this drops in the morning, there could be a completely different read on this recruitment than there is today on Sunday night. And that's just the way things go down in the world of recruiting, especially so close to a decision. When you got a guy that seems to be legitimately waffling between a couple of schools. So 5 days till Evans locks it in, and I have no doubt that there will be some movement between now and then. The question is, does that movement favor Oklahoma or does it favor Georgia?
And as kind of high school seasons get kicked off and they're underway, are there any other 2023 guys that might kind of offer a surprise commitment or might be somebody that Oklahoma's targeting that might commit before we get to September?
I think the big surprise in this cycle came down in early June, and I think it was Keon Brown, a guy that we just talked about. But at this point, I don't know that you're going to see any big surprises down the stretch for Oklahoma. I think it's pretty clearly cut and dried and evident as to who Oklahoma is still pursuing late in the cycle. They've got 20 commits, so the list of guys just keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Obviously, A1 in terms of priority is DJ Hicks, the 5-star defensive lineman out of Katy, Texas. Throw Jordan Renaud in there, 4-star defensive lineman. Cecilia Kana is another guy that Oklahoma is still pressing very hard for. They're making quite a run at Malachi Coleman. And he's really the only offensive guy, save for Anthony Evans, that's still on the board that they got to go and get. So if Anthony Evans ends up going to Georgia, maybe they make a push for a different wide receiver, somebody that doesn't yet have an offer, or somebody like a Mikhail Harrison Pilot that's still uncommitted, but that the Sooners haven't been in regular contact with in quite some time. So I think your offensive class is pretty much a wrap. As soon as you add another receiver and another tight end, the Sooners would ideally like that to be Anthony Evans and Malachi Coleman, but sometimes your best laid plans don't work out. It's really hard to bet against this staff the way that they've been recruiting as of late. And as I mentioned earlier, it just doesn't seem like they can lose lately. And so that's about it for the offensive board. Defensively, you're looking at Vickers, Akana, Renaud, DJ Hicks, and then, of course, the two Denton Guyer defensive backs, Peyton Bowen and Ryan Yates, that the Sooners are going to continue to work the lines with and attempt to flip. Bowen's still in technicality committed to Notre Dame, and Yates is still in technicality committed to LSU, but both of them have been very open about the fact that their recruitment itself is still open. So I think I named 8 guys. Those are the 8 guys that are worth watching down the stretch for Oklahoma as this cycle comes to conclusion. But if any of those guys committed to Oklahoma, I don't think it would be a huge surprise at this point. So no, I don't think we get anything that would be reasonably quantified as a shock.
Definitely want to hear more about Bowen and Yates' possibility to end up in, Crimson and Cream for Oklahoma. But, with Makari, Vickers, and with Anthony Evans, these decisions that are here so close, Parker, you've said you feel good about one, which is Makari, Vickers, and then the other one we discussed in detail with Anthony Evans. Okay, that maybe is as much as a coin flip. If Oklahoma gets those commitments, take us through. I mean, what kind of players are Makari, Vickers, and Anthony Evans?
Yeah, well, Vickers is a guy that has displayed a lot of versatility over the course of his high school career. The all-around athletic profile is very, very intriguing with a kid like that because he's played cornerback, he's played safety, he can bounce inside and play nickel at the next level, although the Sooners, their initial plan for him is to put him at cornerback should he commit to the Sooners on Friday, so they're recruiting him as a cornerback. Alabama and Michigan, from what I understand, are also recruiting him as a cornerback. So that seems to be the fit for him at the next level. But he's a very, very gifted all-around defensive back who can play any of those 3 spots. He's also contributed offensively to quite a degree at the prep level. And he's got some size, 6'1", 190 pounds. So he's by no means a diminutive guy. And we've seen diminutive guys have success at Oklahoma at the cornerback position. Jaden Davis right now is a guy that's looking like he's going to start for the Sooners as a senior, and what a resurgence it's been for him. But obviously, if you can get some height and you can get some stature at that position, you're better off for it, generally speaking. And so you pair him with Jacoby Johnson, whom the Sooners just got committed last week, as well as Josiah Wagner, who, though he's only 5'11", is a lengthy 5'11". He got some tremendous athleticism and some tremendous size at the cornerback position in this class. Jay Valai's first at the University of Oklahoma. And then in Anthony Evans, man, it's just speed, and more speed. I mean, we're talking about a guy that runs a sub 10.3 100-meter dash, which, I mean, we're talking about truly elite speed at that point, not above average speed, not plus speed, truly elite speed. And you pair him with a guy that has a similar athletic profile in Jaquays Petaway, and then a guy that brings some size to the table in Keon Brown. You're really, really confident that Oklahoma's wide receiver class is going to be a problem down the line. And all 3 of those guys are going to be able to contribute in expanded offensive roles for the Sooners on their own timetables. Maybe one cracks it a little sooner than the rest, or maybe they all come into their own right around the same time chronologically. But one way or another, I think you're looking at 3 guys that will play a lot of ball and a lot of very good ball at the University of Oklahoma. And that's obviously contingent upon the Sooners closing on Evans and being able to add him to the fold alongside Petaway and Brown.
Yeah, you can't teach speed. What they always say is speed kills. And that's something I feel like Oklahoma definitely could add. That's something I wonder, like, we loved it with Marquise Brown. Marvin Mims has some of it, but it's kind of like that deceptive speed. It's not that just blow you away from the jump kind of a thing. So, yeah, that Anthony Evans commitment, if they can get that one, that would be huge for the Oklahoma Sooners. All right, coming up next, we got a couple quarterback battles we got to talk about that came down on the Big 12 front. And then Miguel Chavis had some thoughts on the college football playoff expansion that we want to discuss as well. But first, let me talk to you about LinkedIn. As you get ready for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire faster. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I also want to talk to you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find your favorite sports, events, and at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. You can also get in on the college football future odds, Oklahoma's odds to win the national championship, Dylan Gabriel's odds to win the Heisman, all at BetOnline. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, guys. So a couple quarterback competitions came down, were announced over the weekend. First, let's start with the big one. That's Quinn Ewers announced. Well, I've seen where people have said it was Steve Sarkisian that announced it, but really it was the SID that announced it during some player availability. But Quinn Ewers wins the quarterback competition over Hudson Card. Any surprises on that front, Parker?
I mean, it was a bit of a surprise because there seemed to be some credible buzz literally hours before the announcement that it was going to be Hudson Card that took the snaps to start the season for Texas. And look, it's been discussed ad nauseum on social media how much of this was Sark's decision versus how much of it was the boosters forcing their hands. I don't know, and I'm really not going to – I'm not here to speculate on that. Here's what I do know. Quinn Ewers is a guy that has not thrown a pass at the collegiate level, and had he not reclassified, we're talking about a guy that would be a true freshman this year. So this is a lot on his shoulders. And now that you've made the decision in favor of the younger guy, this is a decision you got to roll with, right? If you roll Hudson Card out there and you get shellacked by Alabama in game number 2, which I think is going to happen any way you slice it, I don't think you'll encounter a whole lot of disagreement on that front. But if you start Card for the first 2 games and you're getting it handed to you by Alabama, nobody's going to fault you at that point for plugging in Ewers and seeing what he gives you over the course of the rest of the season, much like they did last year with Card and Casey Thompson. And I had it on pretty good authority that Casey Thompson was the better quarterback anyway, dating all the way back to spring ball. So I was kind of figuring that the Longhorns were going to employ the same strategy that they employed the year previous, which would be take the less talented guy, throw him to the Wolves for 2 games, and then once everybody realizes, okay, this is going nowhere fast, we need to witness a change, and we can't fault Sark for the way that he's about to handle this situation, making the change, then you go with the guy that you wanted all along. And I think Quinn Ewers is the guy that most everybody down at Texas wanted all along. And I'll say this, from what I heard, Card had a better fall camp, a slightly better fall camp. But I think when you're dealing with a close battle in general, you're always going to roll with the guy that has the higher upside, and that's Quinn Ewers right now for Texas. Again, though, I want to bring it back to this fact and hammer this point home. This is a decision that Steve Sarkisian has to live with now, because it is not going to be easy. If indeed Hudson Card did have the better fall, it's not going to be easy for you at some point down the line. Say things aren't coming together for Ewers. Say the offense is floundering and you do need to make a change. Well, now you got to sit down your multi-million-dollar golden boy, consensus #1 overall recruit, the guy that has become the face of Texas football. And now you got to hand things off to the guy that was probably the safer option all along and outperformed the younger guy in fall camp. For so many reasons, that's not a great situation for Sark. So you are betting on Ewers panning out. And if Ewers doesn't pan out, it's going to get real ugly down there on the 40 acres. So I don't think Texas fans are too up in arms about the decision. I think the consensus all along is that Ewers was the guy that they wanted to. But again, there's a lot riding on this season for both Texas as a program and Steve Sarkisian, because if you can't get it done with this cast of characters that they've assembled and you can't take a quantum leap, that doesn't leave you a whole lot of optimism that things are going to get better under Sark. And so I know there were some conversations being had towards the end of last season as to whether Sark was going to be one and done in Austin. He's got a lot of pressure now because there are no longer any excuses. He's brought in an elite recruiting class. He's established his culture. He's handed things off. He's handed the reins of his offense to a quarterback that is as ballyhooed of a prospect at the position as we have seen in years and years and years. So it's got to happen for Texas. If it doesn't, it might be Sark's neck.
And Josh, what do you think about the decision there?
I'm torn. I'm torn on it. I probably what I was going to ask Parker next was, how do you feel? I mean, do you think Texas got this right? Because I don't know where I stand with that. I mean, from a general standpoint, probably, yeah, I do think Texas got it right. Just because, guess what? For all of the reasons that Parker just mentioned right there, Quinn Ewers, yeah, over Hudson Card we're told, we believe, and Parker would be the right person to speak to this based on just the recruiting front. He's got the higher ceiling. So from that standpoint, that alone makes me feel like, okay, they got it right. I don't know, with these high-level type recruits, I mean, is Quinn Ewers really going to be shook if he goes out there and throws 4 or 5 interceptions versus Alabama? Now, I know sounds like dramatic, right? You'd say 4 or 5 interceptions, but it's okay. Yeah, it's a little wild, but it is technically a possibility. 2, 3 interceptions versus Alabama, and you lose that game by a landslide. You hear people say this from time to time, like, oh, what is that going to do to this kid's confidence? What is that going to do going forward? I like to live in the world, live in the belief where it's probably not honestly going to affect Quinn Ewers that much, but other people would ask that question. So from that standpoint, to me, it's did Texas get this right? I think probably they did, just based on a talent perspective alone. I also asked this question. Does this set the stage to get to Arch Madness a little bit quicker? I mean, is that partially what this is about too?
And it's hard to say. I do think if I'm in Steve Sarkisian's position, there's a lot of politics that you have to be mindful of when you're the head coach at the University of Texas. But to be honest, I think the least of all evils would have been to start Hudson Card, because look, you are not beating Alabama. You're not. When they come to town on September 10th, that is not going to be much of a football game. And so if you make a quarterback switch during or in the aftermath of that game, nobody can be all that upset, right? And so you have an opportune time at that point to hand things off to your guy in Quinn Ewers and give him a clean slate. But in the meantime, you can give Hudson Card the nod for the first 2 games, and you can legitimately say, hey, he won this job in fall camp. We're going to give him the first shot because he deserves it. You don't have to stay married to that opinion and that decision beyond September 10th, because I don't know how you guys feel about that game. I feel as though that's going to be a bloodbath. I mean, you saw what Arkansas did to Texas in week 2 last year when it was the end of the line for Hudson Card as a starter. It's going to be more of the same and to the nth degree when Alabama comes to the 40 acres.
I mean, there might be people that are ready to get rid of Steve Sarkisian after that game. Like, it could be so bad that people are just ready, like, we're done, because college football fans, even though it's Alabama, they're going to be incredibly optimistic, thinking that there are going to be some people that think they have a chance against Alabama, especially with Quinn Ewers, the golden boy, at quarterback. Those people are delusional, but they're Texas fans, so we'll forgive them and offer some grace. But I mean, it would not surprise me if we wake up on Sunday morning to a Texas Twitter thread of why Steve Sarkisian needs to be fired today. Like, it would not surprise me in the least. Let's turn the corner, though. Let's talk about Texas Tech's quarterback battle that came down. Now, this one surprised me a little bit. The announcement was made that Tyler Shough would get the start for Texas Tech. I've always kind of been more of a Donovan Smith guy myself in that quarterback battle. Where did you fall on that, Parker Thune? Do you think that the Texas Tech Red Raiders got it right?
I think all things considered, those two guys are pretty reasonably close in terms of their talent level and ceiling. I do like Tyler Shough, and I don't know if he's gotten a fair shake because he did deal with the injury last year. And so I don't know if the rest of the college football world realizes what type of quarterback he truly is. I don't know if they've had the opportunity to realize that. So I'm glad for Tyler Shough that he's getting his shot. And I think when you look at the new look Texas Tech program and what they're trying to build and their offensive vision in particular under new offensive coordinator Zach Kittley, who was at Western Kentucky previously, where they ran a very high octane style of offense. I think Tyler Shough is pretty tailor-made to have a lot of success in an offensive scheme like Zach Kittley's. So in Donovan Smith, you have a guy that's waiting in the wings that has played he's played a lot of ball, and he's capable of stepping in and filling the void if things don't pan out. But I do think you made the right decision in going with Tyler Shough because he is the more experienced guy at this point in time. And I think when you look at what Kittley accomplished at Western Kentucky most recently with Bailey Zappi at the quarterback position, I wonder if Shough surprises some people and opens some eyes this year with the type of production that I believe he can have in Tech's offense.
It feels like it's been eons ago that we were talking about Shough at Oregon, but that actually was part of our human experience. That was, in fact, a piece of our existence. And, I'm with you. I think that he's really talented. And unfortunately, the injury bug just obviously prevented that a year ago. And kind of maybe, honestly, and I'm not saying you, Parker, but definitely for myself, honestly, kind of forgot about Shough a little bit when thinking about that quarterback competition down there at Texas Tech. That could be a sneaky quarterback competition in the Big 12. I don't know if Texas Tech across the board is talented enough to legitimately finish in that upper half of the Big 12, but man, I start thinking about just the Big 12 quarterback pecking order, and I don't think it's crazy, Parker, to see Shough potentially in that upper half of the Big 12 just among quarterbacks.
Well, the bar's low, isn't it? Because at this point in time, you think about the guys who have proven themselves to one level or another, have proven that they're at least serviceable Power 5 quarterbacks. You got Dylan Gabriel, Adrian Martinez, and that's about it, isn't it? Like, am I forgetting anybody?
That's it.
Yeah, Spencer Sanders is about to me probably.
Okay, Spencer Sanders. There you go.
He's right there in that Dylan Gabriel tier, and I mean we've talked a lot about it on the show here. I'm not going to say. I want to try and couch it a little bit more kinder than I've been to Adrian Martinez at times, but I just don't think he's in that upper tier of quarterback in the Big 12. And I might stand alone on this. This might be John Island over here, but yeah, I think Dylan Gabriel, Spencer Sanders, and then it's a bunch of who could be that next guy that steps up into that upper tier. I think a lot of people might point to Quinn Ewers. I don't know, but a lot of that's going to just depend on how the first half of the season goes for him, and if he's not just completely demolished by the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, well, look, there's reason to believe, and that was an oversight on my part, leaving Spencer Sanders out of that conversation. But
they're in Stillwater; they're not listening to the show. It's okay.
Well, I think there's reason to believe that a guy like Blake Shapen could elevate himself into that tier. There's always the chance that it all comes together for JT Daniels. I don't know how realistic that is at this point, especially at West Virginia, but he's got to be in the conversation in that second tier. I'll be curious to see what we get out of Hunter Deckers at Iowa State. And then I think the biggest question mark of all is what kind of player is Quinn Ewers, and what kind of quarterback can he be at the University of Texas? He's got weapons. This needs to be understood and acknowledged. And we're not just talking about Bijan Robinson and Xavier Worthy. He's got a ton of ancillary weapons at his disposal. Obviously, he just lost two of them. Isaiah Neyor is going to miss the season with that knee injury. And Lord knows when if Agiye Hall gets reinstated. But you look at guys like Jaleel Billingsley, for instance. You just go down the pecking order in that receiver room at Texas. He's going to have an arsenal, regardless of whether that includes Hall at some point or not. So if it all comes together for Ewers, he has the chance to be tremendously productive. We just, quite frankly, at this point, we don't know.
All right, and so one last topic we're going to touch on before we get you out of here, Parker. So Miguel Chavis, defensive end coach for the Oklahoma Sooners, asked the question, does the college football playoff need expansion beyond the current 4-team model? His answered his own rhetorical question. My belief is this: an expanded college football playoff benefits far outweigh leaving it at 4 teams. How about playoff home games? More invested fan bases nationally, local economic growth, less bowl skips by players, more fun for fans. Your initial reaction to that, Parker?
I mean, look, my hot take for years has been make the college football playoff the football equivalent of March Madness. Make it a 64-team tournament, because I mean that is the one way to ensure you get maximum engagement from everybody involved. And you have the conversation all the time about how, well, the national champion at that point would be playing like 19 games. And it's like, well, I mean, if you go to the Super Bowl, that's what you're playing in the NFL. So it's not completely unheard of to play that many football games over the course of a season. I am very much of the understanding that that will probably never happen. I don't have a strong belief that the college football playoff needs to be expanded. And honestly, unless that 64-team model that is, I just adore it in my mind. But as long as that model remains implausible, I could honestly care less what the playoff model looks like, because the reality is the 14 playoff that we have right now, it gives you the top tier in college football generally without exception. I don't know if the top tier most years even consists of 4 teams. Some years it's only 2 or 3. And so if you expand to 8, sure, I could get on board with that. I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I also don't know if that's going to yield different or more exciting results year over year. Because to me, generally, every single season in college football, with a few exceptions here and there, you typically have 2 or 3 teams that stand head and shoulders above the rest. And when it comes down to it, those are going to be the 2 or 3 teams that legitimately have a shot to play for and win a national championship, regardless of how big the field is, whether that's 8 teams, 12 teams, even 16 teams. I still believe that more often than not, you'd probably see 2 teams of that caliber and from that top tier emerge as the teams that play each other in the national championship game when it's all said and done. So I know it's not the sexiest perspective, but I honestly don't have a strong opinion as to what the next era of playoff football looks like. I'm fine if it stays at 4. I'm fine if it expands.
I think the thing that drives the expansion for me is the idea of a home playoff game. Like, how great would it be if you're in Norman in December and you're welcoming in, say, Michigan State or something like that, or Penn State, or hey, USC for a home playoff game? Like, I just think that just creates a whole new level of intrigue to the college football postseason that we don't currently get now with the bowl system and the way the college football playoff is set up. And so that's why I'm very much on board with expansion. If they go to expansion and keep the bowl system as part of it, I would be furious, because a December game in Norman, or even up in Columbus, Ohio State hosting a playoff game where they're bringing in USC or something like that for a home playoff game in the middle of winter. Like, that's, like, to me, the traditionalists that would be against expansion, like, that's kind of one of the reasons for expansion, because you get all these bowl games in these warmer climates and you don't get what quote unquote real football looks like when they're playing in a potential snowstorm or something like that. And so I want the home playoff game, at least for the first round of things. You can give it to me for 2 rounds. You can just make it all 3 rounds until you get to the national championship game. Home playoff, because it creates a much more exciting environment than the neutral site games that we get with the bowl system. I win. All the points to me.
I love it. Yeah, no, I'm pro home games in the postseason. I think any way you can try and mix the bowl games into, again, say, games in Norman, Tuscaloosa, you name it. I mean, I think you can have that all meshed together and work for an expanded college football playoff. But like Parker said, I kind of agree with a lot of what he said too, which is, look, if we're not, I like the 64-team model that Parker's talked about in the past. I think that's exciting. But if it's, like right now at 4, quite frankly, is better than it was with the BCS. And I don't think there's really any legitimate complaints that we've had any one of these years since we've had the college football playoff at 4 that, oh man, we left the national champion out of this thing. I don't think we're at that point. But again, if it expands out to 8 or 16, I think would be natural. Then you have 2 home site games. I mean, I think that'd be awesome for the city of Norman, or, insert your college town here. So I'm all about that.
All right, Parker, one last thing. Biggest question mark for the Oklahoma Sooners heading into the season?
Linebacker depth. I mean, it's probably the most obvious take at this point in time, but with TD Roof done for the year with that bicep injury, there's some legitimate questions as to who the second line of defense is, no pun intended, in that linebacker corps, because you have 4 guys that have played some ball before and have played a decent amount of ball during their time in Norman. Deshaun White, David Agwebu, Danny Stutzman, and Shane Witter as well. Beyond that, it's freshmen, man. It's Jaron Kanak. It's Kobe McKenzie. It's Kip Lewis. Then you're maybe throwing in a walk-on like Jake McCoy as a guy that could end up getting a rep here, a rep there, a snap here, a snap there once you get into the season. So you're really banking on those 4 guys being all that you expect that they can be and believe they can be under the direction of Brent Venables and Ted Roof. And you're also counting on them seeing the football field a lot and playing a lot of snaps, because when you look at that freshman group, I don't know if Kobe McKenzie and Kip Lewis are quite ready yet, at least not from what I've gathered and speaking with folks close to the program. Jaron Kanak is there physically, but playing linebacker in Brent Venables' defense is very, very cognitively challenging. And that's the one area of the game. And I'm not calling Jaron Kanak dumb, but he's a true freshman, right? And everybody's kind of learning this thing on the same curve, but the more ball you've played at the collegiate level, the easier it is for you to adjust to a new scheme. Jaron Kanak hasn't, unlike the 4 guys, the 4 upperclassmen in that group right now. So I think Jaron Kanak will play, and will play a decent amount for Oklahoma. He may hear his number called more than even he expects, to be quite frank. If you see an injury at that position, or if one of those 4 guys that I mentioned just doesn't bring it for whatever reason, just isn't all there. But you're really banking at this point on Jaron Kanak being all that as a true freshman, because if you get into a situation where you have a guy go down due to injury, you lose somebody, well, you're down to 3 linebackers on your entire roster that have played any college football. And so at that point, not only are you relying more heavily on Kanak, but you're also going to have to work some guys into the mix, i.e. Jake McCoy, Kobe McKenzie, Kip Lewis, that maybe your best laid plans didn't account for this early on in the process.
Yeah, I think it's a big issue that they're going to have to face at some point, because injuries happen. It's a part of the game, and we're seeing it down right now in Austin. We've already lost one to a season-ending injury in TD Roof. We hope that it doesn't exacerbate with more injuries down the line, but it's just part of the game. It's just inevitable. Injuries are. And so hopefully, some of these guys get up to speed a little bit quicker, but hopefully the linebacker depth chart stays pretty well intact throughout most of the season. But I mean, it's a grind of the season. So I think that's a very worthwhile concern heading into 2022. Hey, I don't know, when this drops on Monday for you podcast listeners, we're going to be 12 days away from UTEP. So get excited. The Brent Venables era is about to take place on the field. We're not going to be talking about it anymore. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thank you so much to Parker Thune. You can check him out at OU Insider 247 Sports. Make sure you go and get a premium subscription over there to get the VIP membership. You get a lot of great recruiting nuggets in there with him and Brandon Drum, behind the scenes stuff that you won't get anywhere else. So go check it out over there. Parker's the man. We always appreciate him coming on the show. But yeah, we'll catch you next time. For Josh Helmer, Parker Thune, I'm John Williams, Boomer Sooner.